Hello, second grade Smarties, and welcome to Module 2, Lesson 3 of the American West. So we are going to go ahead and get started with our big pizza question, and that is, what was life like in the West for early Americans? Our pizza slice question is, how did the actions of the American Indians and early Americans impact the prairie in the American West? And the question that we are going to try to answer today, this is our pizza bite question, is what does a deeper exploration of connections between people, plants, and animals reveal in the Buffalo Are Back? So when we are talking about connections, we talked in the last lesson that this book is an informational narrative book, right? It gives us information about real events and topics in the form of a story. So in this book, there are connections between animals, plants, and people in the prairie. When we are talking about connections, what does that mean? What does it mean for a text to have connections? Tell me what you think connections are between people, animals, and plants in this book. Tell me in the puzzle. So when I think of connections, I like to think about, what do these things or people have in common? What do they share? What do they struggle with? So for example, I have a connection with you because we share in our learning. I teach second grade and you are second grade students. So we have a connection with the same grade level. I am connected to Tennessee because I live in the state of Tennessee. I am connected to my cat's little cat and pizza guy because I take care of them and they cuddle with me. They love me. So connections are things that we have with different people, with different places, with plants, with animals. And those connections can be good connections, and they also can be negative connections. So when we are looking and exploring, doing this deep exploration in the Buffalo Are Back, we are going to be talking about connections that we see between the early settlers and the Native Americans. We're going to be talking about the connections with the buffalo and the prairie and how those four topics all connect with each other. And we see these connections from the beginning to the end of our book. We can find things that we hear over and over again in the stories. When we hear something over and over again in a book, that means it is probably very important. So let's listen to the poem Buffalo Dusk. And in the puzzle, I'm going to have you tell me, what did you hear at the beginning and the end of the poem? What was the important thing that you will have learned from this poem? Here we go. The buffaloes are gone, and those who saw the buffaloes are gone. Those who saw the buffaloes by thousands, and how they pawed the prairie sod into dust with their hoofs, their great heads down, pawing on in a great pageant of dusk. Those who saw the buffaloes are gone, and the buffaloes are gone. What did you hear at the beginning and the end of that poem? Tell me in the Ed puzzle. We learned that the buffaloes were gone, and we learned that in our book, The Buffalo Are Back. We learned that early American settlers took part in killing all of the buffalo because of their bad relationship with the Native Americans, right? And the early settlers and the American government had been in wars with the American Indians, right? With the Native Americans. And so they lost the buffalo. So we learn from that poem, the main important lesson from that poem was that the buffalo are gone. Now, listen to the first couple sentences of our book, The Buffalo Are Back, and the last couple sentences in The Buffalo Are Back. Let's see if you can hear something that is the same. In a time long ago, an orange buffalo calf was born. He wobbled to his feet and blinked. A lark flew to the top of a 6-foot blade of grass and sang as sweetly as a panpipe. All right, so those were the first two sentences of the poem, of the book, and here are the last two sentences. One morning, not too long ago, a young man just out of graduate school galloped his horse across the prairie preserve, counting the buffalo for the buffalo census. Suddenly, he reined in his horse. An orange calf wobbled to his feet and blinked. A lark flew to the top of a 6-foot blade of grass and sang as sweetly as a panpipe. The buffalo are back. So, what did the beginning of the book and the end of the book have in common? What connected the beginning and the end? Tell me in the puzzle. The buffalo. So we learned that the buffalo were in nature at the beginning of the book, and then they came back to the prairie. They were in the prairie at the beginning of the book and came back to the prairie at the end. So as we are reading, we are going to be talking about the connections that we find in The Buffalo Are Back. So today we are going to be making connections between the people, the buffalo, and the prairie. These are pictures that are part of those connections. So we have pictures of buffalo, the government, the settlers, President Roosevelt, the prairie grasses, and the American Indians. Looking at these cards, what are two things that we could connect? What are two things that shared a relationship or impacted the other? So Miss Mason's going to think out loud. The buffalo impacted are connected to the grass because they grazed and they roamed in the prairie grass. They also dug their hooves in the prairie grass to keep the soil good and wet. So those are two things that have in common. How does President Roosevelt and buffalo have a connection? How are they connected? Tell me what you think in the ed puzzle. How are President Roosevelt and the buffalo connected? President Roosevelt wanted to bring back the buffalo to the prairie. He knew that they were important to the West. So, President Roosevelt, remember in the book, we learned that he made it illegal to shoot buffalo in the American West. So, as we are reading, you are going to notice that there is some text that is underlined. Those are words that we are wanting to stand out to find connections. So we are only going to look at certain pages and we are going to talk about how those pages have connections. So let's go ahead and get started. So on this page, I am going to read a few of the sentences and I want you to think about what you hear about the connections with the American Indians, the buffalo, and the grass. The Indians who lived on the plains were setting the grasses ablaze. The fire's ashes put nutrients into the soil, making the grass healthier for the buffalo that ate it. By taking care of the grass, the Indians took care of the buffalo. What connections did you hear in those sentences? Tell me in the puzzle. The Indians set those grasses on fire to take care of the buffalo, right? When they set the grasses on fire, look at what it says. When they set it on fire, it made the grass healthier for the buffalo that ate it. So the Indians took care of the grass, which took care of the buffalo. So did the Indians and buffalo have a good relationship, a good connection, or a bad connection? They had a good connection. They took care of each other. All right, listen to this page. So we are trying to figure out what connection does the US government and the American Indians have with each other. The government broke its treaties with the Indians. Soldiers and settlers were encouraged to shoot every buffalo they saw. Without the buffalo for food, shelter, and clothing, the Indians could not survive on the plains. What connections did you hear in that section? How did the government and Indians have a connection? What was connected with them? Tell me in the puzzle. The government broke its promise with the Indians, and so the settlers and the Indians started the war with the government for breaking its promise. How do the settlers in Buffalo connect? What did the settlers do to the buffalo? Tell me in the puzzle. They shot the buffalo, right? And when they shot the buffalo, what happened to the Indians? They couldn't survive in the prairies, so they had to leave, or some of them even died because they didn't have the buffalo to give them clothing, shelter, or food. So I want you to think, did Native Americans and early settlers have a good or bad relationship in the American West a long time ago? They did not have a good relationship. But let's see how times change. Let's see how that connection changes over time. So remember, after the Native Americans leave, they can't take care of the prairie anymore. So the early settlers started to do what on the land? They started to farm. I want you to listen to how the buffalo and the settlers are connected and how the buffalo is connected to the grass. What do they share together? When the buffalo lived on the prairie, their sharp hooves helped rain reach deep into the earth, and the tough roots of the grass held in the wet. Now, no moisture remained in the soil. The farmers' crops withered and died. So, how were the buffalo and prairie connected? How was the buffalo connected to the grass? Tell me in the puzzle. They dug their sharp hooves into that soil, which helped rain reach into the tough roots and it kept it healthy. But what did the settlers do to the buffalo? They killed all the buffalo. So, could the buffalo help the grasses? No. So, what happened to the farmers' crops on the prairie? They all died because they didn't have the buffalo's sharp hooves to dig into that grass for the rain to get into the soil. They had cows, but what did we learn about the cows on the prairie? Did they really help the grass? No, they ate it all and they have fly hooves, so they couldn't help that grass grow strong. So the buffalo is connected to the prairie because they help keep the prairie grass healthy. All right. So we've talked about how the buffalo and prairie are connected. We've talked about how the Native Americans and the buffalo and the prairie are connected. We've talked about the Native Americans and the American government and settlers and how they are connected, the settlers and the buffalo. Now we're going to talk about President Roosevelt. How are President Roosevelt and the buffalo connected? He knew and loved the land and wanted to protect it for future generations. Nature loving President Theodore Roosevelt especially wanted to save the buffalo. Roosevelt established the National Bison Range in Montana and made it illegal to shoot buffalo. Over the years, more land was set aside in western states for grazing herds. So, how is President Roosevelt and buffalo connected? Tell me in the puzzle. President Roosevelt wanted to protect the buffalo. Why did he want to protect the buffalo? Because he knew and loved the land and wanted to protect the land for future generations of people. He wanted it to be protected for us, but he also loved the buffalo, so he wanted to keep them safe. So here are the connections that we found in our book. So I want you to listen to who or what The connection to who or what. So the American Indians kept the prairie healthy by setting fire to give it nutrients. So the American Indians were connected to the prairie. The American Indians used buffalo for food, shelter, and clothes. So the American Indians were connected to the buffalo. The buffalo kept the prairie healthy, making holes in the soil with the hooves. We talked about that when we were talking about the farmers. The prairie, it provided food for the buffalo. The government broke its treaty with the American Indians, which caused the wars. The settlers killed as many buffalo as they could. The settlers destroyed the prairie by planting crops where there was native grass. And the government, so remember, the government broke its treaties with American Indians, which caused the prairie to kind of die, right? It caused the prairie to stop growing its natural grasses because they killed the buffalo. But then the government in the future, they tried to help bring back the prairie by teaching farmers. The government tried to teach farmers how to take care of the prairie and how to farm in the prairie. So, lots of connections in that book, right? So, when we are writing about the buffalo are back, because we will be doing that in a couple days, we have to make sure that we use topic specific words. Now, we talked about this yesterday. Topic specific words are words that are specific about who or what we are talking about. So, if we are talking about Native Americans, buffalo, settlers, the prairie, we need to use those words if we are writing about that topic. So, for example, we have 3 sentences here. I underlined some words that are not topic specific. We are going to see if we can figure out what topic specific word belongs where the underlined words are. All right, here we go. People wanted to hurt others, so they killed animals. Think back in the book. What kind of people wanted to hurt other people? I remember back in the book, it talked about how the government broke its treaties with Native Americans. So I remember it talking about how settlers, we could change people for settlers, wanted to hurt who? The Indians. So they killed animals. What animals did the settlers kill? They killed buffalo. So here's how we can change it. Settlers wanted to hurt Indians, so they killed buffaloes. Workers taught some people to make the land healthy again. Ooh, I just talked about this. So let's see. The government worked to save the prairie. Farmers were taught to plant and grow crops in curves instead of straight lines. So, who taught some people? The government. So, we can switch government for workers because we have to be specific. Who was helping the people? The government, right? So, we need to be specific. We need to talk about who exactly we are reading or writing about. So, the government taught some, who did they teach? The farmers to make the land healthy again. What kind of land? Where was our book taking place? In the prairies. So we could change it to this. The government workers taught some farmers to make the prairie healthy again. All right, in our last sentence, the buffalo's legs poked holes into the ground, which helped the plants get water. Does that sound very topic specific? I don't think so. What part of the buffalo poked holes into the ground? Poked poked holes into the ground. What's another word that would be better for ground? Soil, right? So, what part of the buffalo poked holes into the soil? Tell me in the puzzle. The hooves, right? So we could replace legs with hooves. The buffalo's hooves poked holes into the soil, which helped the what kind of plant? What kind of plant did they eat? Tell me in the puzzle. The grass, right? So the buffalo's hooves poked holes into the soil, which helped the grass get water. So, guys, when we are writing and reading, we want to be specific. We want our readers to know exactly what we are talking about. So, topic specific words. So, if we read about Native Americans and settlers, we should use those words instead of words like people, they, them. We got to be specific about what we are writing about. So, in a couple days, we are going to be answering this question in an informative paragraph. How did the American Indians, settlers, President Roosevelt impact the prairie in the early American West? So, we are going to be talking about the American Indians, the settlers, and President Roosevelt. So, again, those topic specific words. We can't just use people for everything because remember, these groups all did different things. So, tomorrow we are going to be exploring how we are going to get this writing started. Remember, when we are writing an informative paragraph, we have our topic sentence, our three juicy details, starting with first, then, and finally, and that conclusion. So, we are going to explore that more later. All right. So we are going to do a deep dive to finish out our lesson. So we are going to be talking about the word tough. Now, I want you to think, where have you heard the word tough before? Tell me in the Ed puzzle. I've heard the word tough as like someone being strong or really, really kind of rough. So when I think of tough, I think of rough. I think of someone that is okay to fight or maybe doesn't get hurt a lot. So that's what I think of when I hear the word tough. I want you to listen to this part from the book and think about, what does tough mean in this section? Long ago, when drought came and grasshoppers chewed the healthy grass, the plants would grow back. Their tough roots always survived. But when the fragile crops were chewed by grasshoppers, nothing grew back. So their tough roots always survived. When drought came and grasshoppers chewed the healthy grass, the plants would grow back. So tough in this sentence means what? Grasshoppers would try to chew it, but if it was tough, could they chew it? No, so that means tough is kind of hard, kind of dry, because drought means that I don't get rain. So when the drought came, so when no rain, and the grasshoppers tried to chew the grass, they couldn't because the roots were too rough. They were too hard for those grasshoppers to eat. So tough means long lasting, and it can also mean sturdy or strong. So a synonym, it's a word that means the same thing as our vocabulary word. So tough can also mean sturdy or strong. I want you to listen to these definitions and think about how they relate or do not relate to tough. Withered means to be dried up or wilted. That means to shrivel. Crumbled means broken into bits. Fragile means breakable. In the Ed puzzle, I want you to think, are these words synonyms? So do they mean the same or do they mean the opposite of tough? Tell me in the Ed puzzle. They mean the opposite, right? So if something is withered, crumble, or fragile, that means it is not strong. That means it is not tough. So we have a sort right here, and we are going to figure out if these words mean like tough or not like tough. So let's think withered. If something is withered, that means it's kind of shrunk. Is that like tough or not like tough? Unlike tough. What about survived? If something is survived, that means it is strong. So is that like tough or not like tough? It means it's like tough. If something is strong, where does that go? Tell me in the Ed puzzle. It goes with tough. If something is healthy, where does it go? It goes with tough. And what about fragile? If something is fragile, is it like tough or unlike tough? It's unlike tough, right? So words can have same meanings and opposite meanings to other words. Those are called synonyms and antonyms. All right, Smarties, that is it for lesson 3. Remember to keep that growth mindset. Good learners do hard things, and I will see you guys tomorrow with another lesson. Happy learning, guys.